Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today for our Zoom Q&A, where we're looking at lesson 2, and it's a really important first step in the design process, even though we did have one step in our last lesson with some climate site analysis. Today we're going to be looking at creation of base plan and how important that is in how we build on top of that with our permaculture design strategies. So what I'm going to do is just share our screen here. I see Allie's on the call. Hey, Allie, we're going to answer your excellent question a little bit, well, just after we review the assignment. So we're just going to do a quick review of the assignment, and then we're going to jump over to Allie's question because it's quite a good one, and it does come up on occasion with a few of these sites where we have limited visibility through Google Earth images. So let us just jump over and we'll take a look at that screen. There we go. All right. So lesson 2 has 2 parts, of course. We have the base plan, which is primary, but the reality is if we're designing for others, client survey is equally important. And even though I think when we look at the rubric here, client interview, well, no, it's split pretty well, 50-50. So that's quite good in terms of representation of importance. I can show you one of our client surveys, but let's take a look at the base map first, since that is our first tab here, and we'll go through that. So the base map is just as it sounds. It is our sort of base layer of any design, and we want to make sure that we have a really good representation of the site as is. Okay, so whether that be the building footprint, services coming in to support the building, the existing vegetation or fencing or any sort of significant landscape feature. But let's take a look at what we're being asked to look at here. So the suggestion is taking Google Earth or Google Maps and sort of using that as a guide. And that can certainly be a good approach. And, we could probably spend a few weeks just talking about base maps and how to document sites. And we're in the midst, and I might actually show you that. Not sure if my wife's working on it or not. No. I will bring up a drawing that we're currently mapping. And in a lot of ways, even with drone imagery and high resolution photos, it still has its challenges when we get into tree canopy. So we'll take a look at that. But some of the key elements that we want to look at here are the site and project name. So this is something that we definitely want to. I'm going to jump over to Allie's drawing here just so I can use this template example. But this at the bottom here is called the title block, and that could be running along the bottom of your drawing. It could be in the bottom corner. There's all kinds of variations of that theme. But this is an important piece that you'd want to continue with each design sheet that you put together, all the design layers. And we certainly do that with our work. And what it is, it's really identifying project, where it is. In this instance, the area, the elevation, coordinates, your name and date. And the date is really important. We do want to keep track of, the most current design. So when we're doing these for clients, we have, in addition to this, we'll have a revision block. So it tells us all the different revisions we've done with various design sheets, so that we know we're looking at something current. And so the date is important. The scale is also really important, and that can be tricky for some people, but you do want to include a good scale. And then your north arrow, that's also really important. And as I'm sure you've heard me say a couple of times, ideally we want to have north up all the time. That's kind of the standard in architecture and land design, pretty much globally. Even in the southern hemisphere, they have north up, which you kind of have to wrap your head around in terms of that solar aspect if you're working in the southern hemisphere. So again, we have our elements, which I've kind of covered there, scale. So we want to, first, we want to put on the major items such as structures. Now, if you have a project site with no building on it, you would want to put a proposed structure in there. So pick a place and go with that. You want to put the roof ridges. And that way we know where the water is coming down on each side or multiple sides. It's the access, so any roads or pathways or patios, outdoor spaces. And then we get into things that often people will not include, which are really important. And I found this out a couple times in my years. But underground utilities, we want to make sure those are documented if they are indeed part of the picture. Overhead utilities and contours. Okay, I see somebody's put something in the chat here. I'll keep that open. So I will just shift over to the question in the chat here. So good question from Angie. What if the site is long and skinny? Yeah, let's go and take a look. Okay, we're going to take a look at Ali's work here, and I'm not picking apart Ali's work or anything like that. It's just the template file is open for us. So let's say we're looking at this and say it's long and skinny. And what I would do is, when we're looking at the whole site, is have that north up, whatever that is. So in this case, it's a bit of an angle. And it may not fit on the page perfectly. So beyond this course, let's say north up was the narrow, I guess the long boundary. So it was running horizontally on this page. Beyond this course, what we do when we have a situation like that is we just rotate the page. So instead of it being in landscape format here, it's in portrait, right? So the top of the page would be here, right? But in this course, we can't do that because I don't think Google Sheets is going to allow for that. I think if you went to change the sheets at all, it would change all of them. So I wouldn't recommend that. That could open up a bit of a nightmare for you. When we get into more details of detailed design, so we're looking at sections of the landscape, you can do whatever you want in terms of rotation, but I would try and stick with this north up aspect for now. Okay, so now the other thing is too, don't try and necessarily fill like, and this is easy to keep in the back of your mind here, is that you want to try and fill the whole page with your map. But you can see in this case, we need a little bit of space for, we're going to need a space for a legend and title block and maybe even some notes. So it's not all for naught if you have, um, a long, skinny uh, base plan that doesn't appear to be filling the whole page. So I hope that's helpful. Now, do you have to do it this way? No, you don't have to, but I would highly recommend it. And one reason is when we look at this and you get used to looking at maps that are traditionally north up, you automatically know the solar aspect. If I was to right now go and jump onto Google Earth, it's going to have the same orientation, right? This is one of the big challenges I have is when, um, let's say, there's a need for me to go onto Google Earth to help a student out in with part of my feedback. And if this is rotated and then I have to find that site, in particular when I'm creating contours for them, that can be really challenging. So I'm not, by any means crying the blues here. This just makes for a little more streamlined workflow if we can do that. So I hope that answers your question, Angie. Let's see here. Yeah, so if you can get contour lines, that's great. Now, if you're in an urban area, you may be able to get contours from a local government interactive map. You may want to use this sort of thing, Contour Creator. I would not recommend using Contour Creator for work for pay. It's just not that accurate. But let's see. Let's say we want to get some contours for this site, and we go on here. We can just search the top bar there. And then this is where I have trouble. I have to try and identify where the site is, and I'm not familiar with it. And it's usually in the middle of the page. All right, so it's somewhere around here. It may be a slightly different image than the one that's, there we are. So this is the site here. So you can certainly tell if there was a different orientation, it'd be a little trickier. So if you go on to Contour Creator, and let's say we wanted contours for this site, there's a few settings here you'd want to keep your eye on. So what I would recommend is you go down to level interval. So you want consistent contours rather than it giving you random contours. You probably want to have those in foot measurements. And then let's say we're going with 1 foot. Okay, so we've got our settings here. And then what we do is we click in the upper left and the lower right, and then you have this box and you can make adjustments to that. And once you have it where you want it, you just go get data. And it's basically giving us a legend on the right-hand side here that are 1 foot contours. The red, orange being higher marks and the blue being lower. And then we have our project site here. So we could copy and paste this. We could trace these lines onto the base plan. There's a couple of ways we could utilize that. Now, I wouldn't necessarily, again, be doing this for work for pay. And I can show you what we do with that when I get to that, an example here. I'm not going to start that right now, but we'll take a look at it. So there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and this is one of them. So the other is, and I'll just give you an example. So if where I live is in the regional district of Nanaimo, and they have an interactive map, and these are quite common all over North America. They're a GIS map, and on them we'll often get contour information. Now, it will be relatively crude. So if we go down here, you can see it's going to show me 2-meter contours. So if I zoom in on some area, it's going to load these up. Might take a little while because I got zoom going here. Here we go. We're getting a few contours showing up on the right here. So that can be helpful. On a broad acreage, those might be quite useful. On an urban lot, that may be, insufficient in terms of its resolution, just not quite enough. So these are really interesting interactive maps. They do have a lot of info. They will have the city of Nanaimo, which is another area close to us. They will have property boundaries. In this case, you can get imagery, so you can see where their topography cuts off. So an imagery from various years. So if you like maps, these types of GIS or their ArcGIS maps are very, very interesting. So that's another resource for you. And again, they're often in various areas within North America. Not all, but quite a few. So let's go back to our lessons here. Now, got into contours. So obviously fences, if you have a riparian area or a ditch or any waterways going through your site, it's also a good idea to identify any outdoor taps or spigots. And if you're on acreage, perhaps you have a well, existing vegetation. So I would say, significant vegetation. We don't need to know everything. You wouldn't, that might be a little bit daunting. But certainly anything significant in your landscape, a legend or a key, and the property boundaries. So traditionally, those are great to see in red, but if you prefer yellow, whichever you want to do, and any easements. So that's important as well. So in quite a few projects that we're involved with, especially in urban areas, there'll be an easement. And what is that? Well, that's often an area, that you pay tax on and own, but that the municipality or the regional district may have um, the right to access. So that could be for power lines. That might be for utilities running through your property. So that's a good one to be aware of because you wouldn't want to be putting anything permanent over an easement because you do risk that getting disturbed at some point down the road. And then any other features. So we'll look at some examples and dial into that a little deeper. Got a question here from DSG. How would you mark a temporary seasonal creek? Well, excuse me. Often water is, we would use blue. Let me just see. The fact it's seasonal, you could just label it as such, right? But I think I got the template file here, and there's there should be a legend that has some symbols. There we go. There's seasonal pond, but sort of I guess a little bit would depend on the size of it. So if it's kind of a ditch-like flow, it wouldn't have to be depicted as being very wide. You'd want to try and represent it as accurately as you can without, getting silly about it. But labeling it as seasonal would be a really good idea. Then in August, obviously you're not getting any flows through it, but it may be a value to know that it's a wet area that is a resource. So I hope that answers your question. All right, so that's a little bit about base maps. We're going to look at Ali's question, and we're also going to look at some examples. But before I do that, we should probably just quickly touch on the survey. And for some of you, honestly, when I was early on in my career, I didn't focus on this as much. And I was on some very large projects, and I was quite fortunate that it all turned out well. But if you're not really paying attention to your clients and their needs and what they like, it can rear its head on you later. And the whole idea, really, if you're doing this work for others, is it's not your landscape, and you want to try and do the best you can with the context of the setting and all the resources that are there, but you want to also integrate that into what your clients want in terms of utilization and what they find really appealing and some of their concerns and stuff. So this is a really important step in the design process. It really let me try and I'll bring up an example. I should have done this ahead of time, but I did not. Um, yeah. So I'll just skip by that because I don't really want to identify my clients here, but we have a very similar process where we're asking, some particulars about our clients, their names, their um, ages, what they do for a living, how they heard about us, things that aren't necessarily on your template file here. But the gist of it is, what the people want, and luckily these people had a lot of feedback here. What they really like about their property, what they don't like, some of their concerns, um, their lifestyle, um, and some of the desired outcomes that they want. So let's see here. Go back. Sorry about that. I will get a I will get a blank. This makes a little more sense, having it blank. Then you can see what we have put together. So when we get an inquiry, like we got one on Saturday, basically I send a link. I create a copy of this, so I keep the original, and send them this questionnaire, and they fill it in, and then we have a little chat on the phone after, and we go through this and just make sure we're a good fit for this client. And again, when we were starting out, somebody called, that was fabulous. We didn't really, you know, spend a lot of time figuring out whether we were a good fit. We were just super pleased that somebody was interested in our service, and away we went. But as you get more established, it's really good to just dial into clients that are really a good fit for yourself. And yeah, these are some of the questions that we put forward to people. And again, it's going to be similar but different than what's on your questionnaire. But and we have a slightly different one for farm design. But basically, we want to find out as much as possible about the people, about what their intention is, how much time they spend, how much time they want to spend maintaining their property. Maybe they want to grow all of their own food, but they don't have more than, half an hour a day. Well, that could be a tough fit, right? So you want to make sure that this is all going to align. If we go to the client interview on the template file, it's again going to be somewhat similar. What's not here? Well, there is a budget. And, this one is really hard. If beyond this course, if you're doing this for others, or if you're currently even doing that as a designer, this is a really hard one for people to grapple with. How much am I going to spend? And I get it. Part of it is, do I want to divulge that information? Um, but, as a designer, you could design the Taj Mahal for somebody, and if they don't have the budget for it, it's not really getting good value for them. So it's something I encourage people to at least consider. And here we have single or multiple clients, and the site inventory, again, very important. What's there? What do they want? So I really like this part of the template file. It's sets out some really good questions, and it's pretty much dials in. So with the questionnaires we get, the one I briefly showed you, we actually had my wife and myself both of us lost our fathers within a month of each other last year, and we had to basically shut our business down for a little while. Other than the schoolwork, I wasn't taking on anything, and we had people that had already signed on the dotted line and then wanted to go with their designs. So the one client had to wait a whole year. Um, so these questionnaires are just so vital for us because we then started to pick up our work again and get moving on it. And of course, a year is a long time. So without the questionnaire, it would be very, very difficult. We also had an online meeting with them just to review it and make sure we were really dialed into what they want to do with it. So this is a really vital part of the puzzle, and it may be hard for you to hard to realize if your project site is your site right now, but that's a good starting point, and that's where we all start, I think. But as you work for others, this is really worth putting a lot of time and energy in, is just to make sure you know what people want. So you don't want to start designing elements and uses that client doesn't see any value in. An example is we're starting very early phase of a design for a couple, and they have a piece of ALR, so agriculture, a piece of land that's in the agricultural land reserve. And you might think, wow, great farm, away we go. No, well, they don't have any intention of farming it. So if we were gearing our design towards a farm, then we'd be really missing the mark on that one. So again, that's a good thing to dial into. And I think that's about it in terms of the survey. It's pretty straightforward. And again, this is our little example, which is very similar to what, I mean, there's only so much you can, um, only so much you can ask, and you don't want to overload somebody. So yeah, that gives you a little snapshot. Um, well, maybe if nobody has any questions about that, we'll go to Ali's question here. And I think to do that, I will change my screen settings here and just look at the whole screen. There we go. Make it a little easier. All right. So Ali had a good question, and she didn't write it in here. I did. It was through an email, and her site, which we were looking at here, has quite a bit of tree canopy, even though it's a small, relatively small urban site, which, you know, as you can see, most of them are pretty open and pretty easy to document what's on the ground. But in her case, this is tricky. So how do you go about getting a reasonably accurate survey, or not survey, a reasonably accurate base plan if you can't see anything in Google Earth? Well, there's a couple things that we can do here. Here we are in Google Earth. So a few things we can do. So for Ali, let's see, where are you, Ali? In Bend, Oregon? Yes. So there may be some online uh, information about property boundary, right? Uh, I don't have that, and I don't think you necessarily do at the moment. So let us, I just got a little draw tool here I've got to find. Don't use it too often here. Uh-huh. There we go. Oops, it's on the wrong desktop. Okay. Well, I'll have to flip back and forth. All right. So, no. Okay. Well, I'll have to use what I got in Zoom here, which isn't, that will do. Okay, so let's say we have established the property boundary. And now there's a couple ways that could happen. Your clients or the property owner may have a legal survey. And if that is the case, then you will have some accurate measurements here that you could place on your drawing. You may have to just guess. I wouldn't do that if you're doing this um, for somebody, but for this exercise, you could if you had to. But a legal survey is great, and often that comes in Canada, anyways. Often people will get that when they purchase a house, and often it will have the property boundaries and the footprint of the house. So that's a total bonus, and that's a great place to start in terms of building on your base plan. And that's what we ideally want to see when we're doing our work, is that as a starting point. And we don't always get that. And then, funny enough, we asked for that on a project recently, but we weren't clear enough, and the person had a survey done, but the surveyor didn't include the building footprint. So then, you know, there's a mismatch there. We have no idea where we don't have a fixed idea where the footprint of the building was in comparison to the property line. So we kind of had to fudge that a little bit. and clients were aware of that, but it wasn't vital. So once you have this, that's probably as far as you could get. You could do a rough outline of your building. I'm just going to use different colors here because you could probably make an assumption that, and this is I'm doing this kind of on the fly and not with any great degree of accuracy, but building footprint might be something like that. Uh, so beyond this, and even this isn't quite where I'd want to be. Um, you'd want to be on the ground taking some measurements. So what we do when we're building a base plan, and we had to do it on a project recently, and I don't like to do it because it's a lot of extra work, but what you have to do is map it all out on the ground. So you go to the site and you start to measure all the faces of the building, right? So a simple building like this wouldn't be too bad. So you take all these measurements and where the door and window locations are, we do that. Maybe the overhead door, and you get all of that documented. And that's just, a big foolscap piece of paper, and you're just going along, and you might say north side of the house, and you make some references on a piece of paper, how long they are, what's the full length of the wall, and where are the windows and doors in that. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. One thing you can do that, just looking at this, it looks like there's a driveway or a walkway going up to the house here. Now, if I zoom in, I'm going to lose what I've drawn on top of it. So let's say that there is a driveway here, and we'll use a different color. So let's say we know there's a driveway running right here, or at least we can see this edge of it. That is a great starting point. And what we do is then you can relate these two elements. So you could draw out your building based on the measurements that you've taken, and then you could place at least one edge of the driveway based on where the road is and where the building is. And then once you have a fixed point that you've established, you can start triangulating from there. Okay, and that's what we have to do. So let's say there is, and this was the case on one of our projects. Let's say there is a property boundary pin right here, right where that pink dot is. And what we would do if we were, you have to do this on the ground, and it is a little bit laborious. Yeah, and having two people is super helpful, but you can do it on your own. You would measure from the corner of the house to that pin, right? Get that measurement. And then you would go over here to this corner of the house to that pin. Okay. And those two measurements are going to help you align the building on the property. Now you may have the same thing on the other side, and we'll give it a circle here. That would be in the corner, not where I put it, but it's the same idea. We would then take a measurement from this corner to this corner of the house, and from this corner to the other corner of the house. And that's provided you had a straight shot, and you could do that with either a tape measure. we have a 300-foot tape measure, and we also have a measuring wheel that you can just run along the surface. Now, you may not be able to see there, so maybe you have to just do these 2 points. But if you triangulate it and it's the distance between the base of the triangle is larger, you're going to have more accurate measurement. And then this is the principle that we use to identify almost everything. So all of these trees, if you wanted to know where they were, you would measure, let's say if that was the middle of this tree, you'd have to measure from that point of that corner of the house and that corner of the house, right? So and where those 2 lines meet is where your tree is. I'll show you another method here that I've had to use. Sometimes you have to improvise. Let's say you had, I'll get rid of these. What I've also done is, let's say this is the side of your house, even though we are showing the roof here, which is there'd be an overhang. So the wall of the house is inset, at least a foot, I'm sure. But let's presume this is the wall of the house. If you took a tape measure and you ran it out straight to let's say the sidewalk or the road, and you made sure it was in alignment with the side of the house, you could go along here. Oh, I see I got a question. I'll have to keep my eye on that. Oh, I'll get to your question in 2 seconds here, Tommy. You could go along. So let's say you run this tape out and you're trying to identify, say, where these trees are. And again, this is a different method. So you put the tape on the ground and you walk out to say where the center of the tree is. And let's say this is the 10-foot mark. And then you'd run another tape parallel to that tree and say that's 20 feet. Say you want to find this tree. So you're going out and say you're at the 40-foot mark. And you run your tape and it's 8 feet. You can use this method. And this works. But I would say triangulating is more accurate, right? And I hope you guys don't have to do this too much because although, the more you do, the more you learn. And sometimes you start with really good site data. And I'm going to show you, here, I'm going to get rid of these lines because as soon as I leave this screen, I don't really want these to follow. There we go. Let's see, Tommy has a question. You're wondering about the base map layered over the aerial image. Yeah, none of the aerial images are clear enough to make sense of anything for my site. Is that slide needed? I would include it. Yeah, I would include it. It's a pretty easy process, right? Just make sure. I mean, Google Earth just isn't that clear. And I'm sure that in part is intentional. They don't really want to provide for free, high resolution images. I'm sure they are available, but yeah. So
I already have the slide done. I just can't make anything out of it. So
yeah, I get it. It can be tricky. Um, I would just include it. Sure. So what I should show you, a couple things I've got. I should check in with Ali. Ali, does that make sense on our approach here to try and document all these individual And another thing I would do if you're doing some mapping on site is take a whole bunch of photographs, which of course is so easy nowadays with a phone, but just take a whole bunch of photos, um, and be kind of aware of where you're taking those images. Like you might want to place yourself right at the corner of the building and kind of do a pan from there. And that might help you as you're assembling your base plan based on measurements, because there'll be questions that come up. You'll go, oh gosh, this doesn't make sense. And that happens. Um, and then you can reference the image. You might say, oops, I missed the sidewalk and here's where it is, or a certain plant or something. And it can be multiple pages of notes to sift through. But does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit of a long process, but let me show you a couple things. I'm going to get our software going here, but in the meantime, here is this an interesting um, little project we're starting on. And so we use Google Earth. Um, we just don't use it for our design work. I hope Google Earth's going to cooperate here. There we go. So there's a project close to where we live, and I should be. Um, what we do, we had a drone survey done of this property, and those are the contours that we got from the drone survey. I also have, so I can turn those off. I'm going to turn these items off too. You can't see them, they're below. So I've also got, you can also take a drone imagery and place it over Google Earth, which is kind of cool. Google Earth's pretty powerful. Now, it did not cooperate. It hasn't shown the whole site. It'll only show me part of the site. But this is really just for communication purposes. We're not designing here, but are designing in this space. Gosh, I keep losing. I keep importing. I got a property boundary. That's what's called flow direction. We do these slope maps, and there's a legend there, so that tells us if we have our property boundary selected, what the slopes are like. And you can see this whole area is pretty flat. And this is part of the problem with this particular site is water backing up on this rail line that's running through it. And whether we can actually achieve a result here or not, I'm not sure. And now those are current contours. And I keep importing. Maybe I can do that while we're talking here. I keep importing my QGIS because we use that as a software when we're when we're trying to get a big picture of an area. We use QGIS and we get free LiDAR data. And if you're in Oregon, you could certainly do that. But it's learning the software is not pleasant. It is tricky. There's no question of that. Just trying to find, I think this is right. We'll see if that imports. No, maybe the other one. There we go. So those are, I'm not sure why it's doing this, but I have 1 and 2 foot contours of the whole area. Those are 1 foot and those are 2 foot, I think. But so that's pretty cool for visualization. You know, you can do a lot with Google Earth, and it's very handy for larger properties, especially here where we have severe drainage issues and we're trying to figure out, you know, where's the water coming from and actually can we do anything um, to make things better here. So just thought I would throw that out at you. I'm going to quit this and I will just show you where we're at with. No, I'm on the wrong drawing. Sorry about that. My wife's been working on it, so it's not not where it should be. Let's see here. Hmm. Got a few minutes left here. I'll just show you. So we've got this project we've started, and we're just in the base plan creation. It's taken literally weeks, not of full-time work. We've had to make 2 site visits. We have the high resolution images. So this is a drone imagery. So you can see, you can really get high resolution out of a drone, which is great. So for mapping, wow, this is wonderful. It makes it easy. But when we back up, we can see that quite a bit of the site has tree canopy on it. And that's where the access road comes through. And there's a whole bunch of fencing here that is much harder to map. So one of the things that we have done, and I don't know if I can show it to you here. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me see if I can find it here. We use an app called Gaia GPS, and I don't know if I have it saved here or not. And it's also, you know, it's a tool one can use. Just see if I have it bookmarked. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't. But what it does is quite fascinating, and I wish I could show you the interface, maybe for a later date. But you can be on um, hmm, you can be on the site with your phone, and let me see if I can locate their project here. There we go. So we're walking around the site, taking images, and it doesn't show here. I have to go on to either my phone or the interface with the web browser, but I get GPS information here. Actually, I could have showed you on Google Earth, and I'll do that. So I'll start that up again. It always likes to crash on me. So what you can do is you can embed these photos into Google Earth, and it will embed and position itself within the landscape and give you, you know, a reasonable amount of accuracy. And that's basically what we've had to do here. Like even with this fencing, we have no idea where it is because the drone imagery didn't show us that. If I, there you go. So there's the beginning of our base plan. We're getting there. Um, there's all sorts of visibility options that we have, but you can see we've got a contour map. We've got a site model that we've built already. And let me just show others. There we go. It looks a little better. I've got the droner image on. So what we can do when we have all this data is we can actually embed the drone image onto a 3D site model here so that we're able to, further visualize this versus the contours, right? And you can see there's quite a bit of a drop here in elevation. So it's kind of an interesting tool. But this is the beginning of our base plan, and you see all these little pink crosses. Those are all of the measurements and GPS photo indication. This is a geo-reference drawing, so that anything we import that has georeferencing on it will be accurately placed. But as you can see, this is and this is only 7 acres, but there's a lot that goes into the beginning. So we have spent hours and hours on this, and we haven't even started designing yet, right? But the better this is, the easier the design's going to be. And this, I'll show you right here, this app, the Gaia GPS app. There we go. So we've taken these photos, and for some reason they're not showing, all of them are not showing up. But this is pretty cool. So if we wanted to map this out, I just click on that, and boom, there's the photo. That's where I was standing, and it has georeferenced itself right in that position. So from a mapping standpoint, that's super helpful. And that that was very helpful over here where we had some fencing that I had no idea where it was. The drone didn't pick it up. And of course, it's old, dilapidated fencing, but nonetheless, we have to indicate where it is. So photo didn't show up there, but there's one here. There's 3 here. And this is where a wet spot was. So this is a really good tool, and it's pretty low cost. So that's Gaia GPS. Now that I've overwhelmed everybody, I was trying to impress how important the base plan creation is, and some of the ways that some of the tools you can use. So again, this is one of those tools. It even tells us, last week, the exact time that these were taken. And it's helpful as far as mapping goes, because even with the drone image, we're not able to grasp everything that's on a site here. So, all right. Well, that's enough me rambling on. Does anybody have any questions at all they want to ask? So Angie's got a question. Seems like a lot of emphasis on computer generated images. Yeah. Well, this is the world that that we live in. I'm not very good at drawing, and I recognize that, guess about 27 years ago when we started our little venture up. So I started using a CAD system, which basically is the same as I use today, Vectorworks. Now, hand-drawn, I absolutely adore. I think if you can draw by hand, oh, it's amazing. One thing I will show you that I haven't talked about too much here is you can kind of get a middle ground with the hand drawn, and I'm trying to remember the name of the software. Just 1 second here. I don't use it very often. Well, hardly at all. Oh, Jessie Bloom, because I see your note about Jessie here. She uses it. Oh my gosh, what is the name of it? I don't have my iPad near me. It's an iPad. 2 seconds, I'll just grab it. And it's a great app. It's only like $30 a year for a subscription. And I have it. I just don't use it much because we've got Vectorworks to play with. But for somebody starting out, it is fabulous. Morpheo Trace. There you go. So that is highly recommended for an iPad. And we've got a couple more questions here. So yeah, you really like Jessie Bloom's video on hand drawing using trace paper and overlays? Absolutely. That is, I totally encourage you to go that way. If you're a good drawer, I would lean in that direction. And there's nothing more beautiful than hand drawn, honestly. If you look at, if we go back onto the course platform here, and you go to, let's see here. When you enter the course, if you go to that modules section and you look at the client interface, which is very interesting to see how everybody does their own design work. And you look at Andrew's work, I just love his drawings too. He just, we're not going to go through this video. But if we take a look at, if we can skip ahead. Well, it doesn't want to skip ahead for me. I'm not sure why. Anyways, Andrew does some beautiful drawings. So I totally encourage anybody to go that route. I was just not able to do it. And tracing paper, so as beautiful as those are, the one advantage that I find with the CAD system is when we get to pricing and knowing different areas, right? It can extrapolate data from the drawing really quickly, as well as plant lists and that sort of thing. But it doesn't look as nice. There's no doubt about that. So Ashley, what about SketchUp? Yes, a lot of people use SketchUp, and it's much more affordable than Vectorworks. I would almost say that, you know, Morpheo Trace is also, yeah, I would say it's a little softer. Although again, you probably couldn't pull the data out of it that you would want to, but SketchUp is definitely useful. I think it's just a question of starting with something that resonates and just going with it, you know. And I was really lucky. I started with Vectorworks a long time ago, and that was a good decision based on my abilities. The downside of the CAD systems is you get into more 3D work. You need a more robust computer to operate them. So with Morpheo Trace, for instance, you just need an iPad and a pencil. Pretty low cost investment, relative to, I think Vectorworks brand new is, I don't know, some $3,000 or, and then plus your computer. And so you have to do a fair bit of design work to make that, you know, make sense. We just we're on an annual, we're not on a subscription. We're on what they call Service Select. So we pay annually for updates and education and stuff. But we do quite a few designs every year, and it makes sense for us. Um, a few years back, we were doing a lot more installation work. And even with just doing 2 or 3 designs, you still needed that software to execute the designs because we would detail it out quite a bit, and then that's what we would use in our pricing because we would do fixed pricing on all our installs. So you have to have pretty good data to know how much soil you need and what plants you need, and then you have to extrapolate how much time this is going to take, and that's a whole course unto its own, trying to do estimating. The same thing with the design. We used to do our design work kind of hourly, and then realized, it's better to do it on a fixed price so people know right out of the gate how much is this going to be, rather than kind of loosey-goosey. Well, it could be this, could be that. So we started tracking the amount of time it took us to do our design work. So now we can accurately, pretty accurately price that all. So, okay, Ali, uh, thank you very much for attending. Good to have you here. Yeah, I should chime off myself, and unless anybody has some questions they want answered. I hope some of what you saw today is helpful on your quest to build your base map. If you do have any trouble during the week, let me just, oh, I'm glad it was helpful. Let me just, I'm going to stop share here. And I'm going to put my calendar, just 1 second here. Just in case somebody gets stuck during the week, if you need help, I'm going to just paste my a link in here to the chat. There we go. Oops. There we go. So if you do get stuck and you need a quick meeting to walk through anything, you can just click on that link and see if there's a little time available, and book. I'm happy to help people out if they get stuck. I don't want, we want everybody to succeed in their in what they're doing here. So anyhow, Angie has a statement here. Maybe in the future, because it seems getting the base plan right is so key. Can be lengthened. Yeah, it would, really depend on it's a good point, Angie. Some of the projects, like the one I showed you there, that's taking us forever to document, on that case, yes, it does take a long time. So some of the urban projects would be, more quick and easy, but and it may be possible that, we're going to lengths, greater lengths than others would be. I just like to have things as accurate as possible. I'd hate to design something that you then go to the site and look at and it doesn't work because your drawing's off a little bit. So, all right. Well, yeah, thank you everybody here. It's great to have you join me today, and hopefully there's a bit more clarity with your base plan, and just do the best you can. And of course, it's all um, a work in progress. You know, what you do today and what you do a year or two from now, you'll probably find that your process gets refined and you're just doing a better and better job. So just do your best. And again, if you get stuck, let me know. I can help you out. But thank you all for being here, and we will look forward to seeing your assignment next week. So you take care.